Hello, students. This is Professor Patti, social work, 626. We're here in week 1, and this is what suffices for your lecture this week. So let's just go right to the home page. We go into our home page and course content. This is week 1, and we have a syllabus review and a syllabus review video, a journal article, and actually I am trying to read the articles every week. So we've got that rolling. And today we are working on our PowerPoint. And here is the assignment that's going to be due Friday night, 1 week from today at 11:59 p.m. So our PowerPoint starts with understanding community and the challenge of change, social work as the still mirror. Now, this is a phrase that comes up. I first heard it when I was doing child parent psychotherapy training, and we actually had peer breakouts where we talked about compassion fatigue and burnout, because child parent psychotherapy is working with patients aged prenatal to 5 years old who have been exposed to trauma. And it's just a really high acuity population. When children need trauma therapy before the age of 5, there's things going on when the caregiving system has not been sufficient to provide the protective factors for healing that we would typically see. So one of our old war horses who'd been in the field for a very long time and had her own private practice, brought up some lovely techniques, one of which was chewing gum that she participates in. And she said she would chew mindfully. She'd sit with it in her mouth, which helps you keep your mouth closed when someone's talking, and suck on the gum and take one bite of the gum and focus on the sensation of the flavor. And she also had this visualization of herself as a mirror. And the more upset or the more stressed or the more biased or the more controlling that we are, the cloudier that mirror is. So when I have my own biases and judgments, well, that's really typical. I don't know about you, but in my bathroom, I have to clean the mirror every week because schmutz gets on there, dust gets on there. If I burn a candle, there's a fine soot that can really build up. And so in social work, we are taking the onus to pay attention to what's around us. And that's with individuals, families, groups, organizations, and communities. And in this practice with communities, it is essential to understand what our own positionality and perspective is so we can clear that mirror and understand and say, this is what I'm seeing reflected back. Is there anywhere where I'm not clear? And that's where the conversation begins. So in our non-required Holman text brings up a really lovely dilemma, which is, what do we call our clients? What do we call our patients? What do we call our guests? And how that language shapes how we treat our residents. I know I've worked in residential facilities where we talk about the house, and the house is the collective family of humans who live at, I was working at the Welcome House of Northern Kentucky. And so we talked about, well, this is a house that's a little more rowdy. This is a house that has a lot more kids. This is a house that has a lot more singles. And in the homeless world, singles are people whose children are not currently residing with them. And so all of those people would have a personality in a community, right? If we are talking with a client that has, I would say, a stigmatized, that has a stigmatized lens to it. That's someone who is a consumer, right? A consumer is someone who has choice and more power. So if I'm a case manager and I'm calling all of my individuals, families, groups, and organizations, my consumers, my patients might even not even know who I'm speaking about, right? When I refer to people in the third person, do I call them my kids? Do I call them my babies? Do I call them my people? How do I refer to them? How do I name them? I was on the board of directors at the Metanoia Project, which is a hospitality network, and they very intentionally refer to the people who come in and eat and participate in community. And sometimes when it's below 22 degrees, they sleep indoors. We refer to them as our guests. And we don't say we're a shelter, we say it's a hospitality center. And that language, right from the get-go, really sets the stage of rolling out the red carpet, and it's done very intentionally. So who do you consider and how do you refer to the subject of your intervention, the members of the community? So the author Holman often refers to community members or participants. So acknowledging systemic problems. Saul Alinsky in 1945 condemns social work as treasonous for reasons that if you all look up the Alinsky article, I bet you would agree with. And I saw something online that said, I love my children, but not enough to comply with that traitorous tattletale elf. And ACAB, all cops are bad, extends to Elf on the Shelf. All cops are bad extends to our own internal idea that we're supposed to tell on people. Miss Sepp, Counselor Corner, there's wonderful information here. I love introducing you guys to free resources. And I was looking up just tattletales. So this is from some years ago. This is 12 years old, but your mind your own beeswax rule. When kids are developmentally going through, or us grown folks, when our inner child is developmentally going through this sense of justice and this expansion of the world and this idea of forcing rules, compliance, and accountabilities on others who have harmed us, what do we call that? A tattle tongue. So this is a great kids book that explores this issue where he says, do I tattle or do I not tattle? And we come up with some great tattle rules. And I love rule number 4, MYOB, mind your own beeswax. If the problem is not dangerous and does not involve you, do not tattle. This is something that social workers, we've really done a terrible job of historically in this century, as we have really aligned ourselves with policies that are preserve the institutions we work for, and then are concerned about liability. In our, when someone says, and these are questions on your social work exam, they'll say, what do you do if a patient says they're not sure if they want to be here or not? And the first one is call 911, make a mandated report. And there are organizations that are social service organizations that is their policy. They say, don't work it out. You're not licensed enough to do that. Well, as a social worker, we are obligated to engage, assess, and evaluate what is actually going on with that individual before we take further action. So that's kind of the theme of the treasonousness of social work as a profession. So when we look at what is visible in our communities, we can see some objective measures that indicate that our societies are not set up for the best health, the best emotional, the best physiological, and the best spiritual health for the members of our communities, for the families in our communities, for the organizations, the groups, and our community as a whole. There's many objective measures that indicate that we have oppressive structures regulating and rule setting. So how do we address that? And this is the domain of social work. Not that people have asked us, but here we are continuing to be ready to and placing ourselves in positions of readiness to intervene. So how do we acknowledge those systemic problems? Well, the article from Block actually speaks directly to this point in a way that I've already read for you and that I would like you to read yourselves. How do you support your argument for the cost of social problems? So on the Holman text, we do have a number of different resources, but we have the Bureau of Justice Statistics where we can look things up. In our content, I had it in here. I couldn't figure out why I had it in this week, and I'll tell you we did. Resources for you to edit as you need, make available. Resources that you can edit. You can look at the Neo-Cando Northeast Ohio Community and Neighborhood Art Organizing. This is free resources that will tell you in Northeast Ohio who lives there, how do they live there, and they actually have great information on how to do it. I'm not going to go too much in here, but this is one of the things I'd like you to include. Do you see these? It's not all of the counties in Ohio, but it's a lot of the Northeast Ohio. You can make reports, which will be part of your assignment 1, describing your community. Where can you look to support your article is rates of serious violent crimes. You're also going to find many of the articles each week are directing you towards places where you can support objective, measurable, open source data. How can you find rates of caregiver abuse? I know a lot of people talk about elderly programs, geriatric social work. Do not use Wikipedia as your resource. Please do not use Western news resources as your resource, other than to cite them and also compare against clearinghouses of validated data. We would like to acknowledge systemic problems. I have a health perspective on things. And I have a trauma-informed perspective on things. And I really love in my social work practice to look at the brain and how it develops and measurable changes to the brain. If we reference Besser van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score, and Bessel van der Kolk, that book, that textbook, it indicates that the point of the brain and the point of our entire central nervous system is to protect us and to move from parasympathetic to sympathetic states and access different parts of our limbic system, which makes us feel safe and loved, our temporal lobe, our prefrontal cortex, our fight, flight, freeze response, our amygdala. There's all these structures in the brain that we condition. Now, here we have some, maybe you think they are very cute mice. I find rodents to be terrifying because my body keeps the score of a mole infestation that happened in my house when I was 12 years old. So I am immediately startled by them. However, in trauma-informed care, we often talk about rat city. So we do lots of research on rats, and I could go on for a very long time about the humane treatment that we provide lab rats that we do not provide for humans in our society, but I digress. Imagine, if you will, that there's rats in Rat City, and in Rat City, they count. There's researchers who counted how often these rats would participate in play. And then they introduce, there's pretest, how many times a day, an hour do these rats engage in play? And then they introduce a control variable, which is cat hair and the smell of cats. And what they found is those rats, those same rats, played much less often, right? Not surprising, right? When they remove the cat hair and there's no cat hair around, guess what they found? After these rats never returned to the same level of play as they did before they were exposed. So trauma permanently changes the science of our brain. Now, these rats could not engage in dialectical behavioral therapy, so it does not measure the therapeutic benefits. And what we do know about trauma and what's missing from these studies is the post-traumatic growth and healing that is possible and measuring healing factors. We do know that the rats in a cage who are given a button to get cocaine water or not cocaine water will just use drugs until they die. Well, those studies are done on rats who have nothing else to live for. When they have no socialization, they have no sense of purpose, they have no sense of community. And what they found is if they set these same rats up in a social community conducive to how rats live naturally that supports their health, they don't develop addictions to that same water when they have cocaine water and no cocaine water. So there's a lot that we know from treating rats humanely and developing living situations that are conducive for rats the way that they are designed. And we have not implemented those on a large scale in the United States of America. That's what we call a systemic problem. Systemically, we know that the way that we are living so removed from nature and so removed from purpose and community and connection causes females to ovulate sooner and sooner and sooner compared with people who have never been exposed to the industrialized world, the females tend to start menstruating around 17. So there's measurable changes that we can tell as if we didn't already know and have common sense that the way that humans are living right now in the industrial world is not good for our health. So we can acknowledge those. How do we measure those things? That's what I would like you to be thinking about. What's the bottom line cost and what are the measurable effects? Because that's how we can tell. Can you see with the Rat City? We can tell how people are doing based on these measurable objective criteria. Now, I want you to imagine that wherever you're sitting, if you went right outside and the first fence you came upon, there was a black bear standing upon it. Your brain would go from, this is our conscious discipline model of the brain. Here's our brain stem, here's our amygdala. Breathing, respiration, digestion. Happens even when we're asleep, happens when we're unconscious, right? The limbic system that engages when we are not in excruciating emotional or physical pain, we are not in danger, we are reassured. That builds really great neural pathways to our prefrontal cortex where we make really great decisions. We think about long-term consequences. We are sitting in wherever we are right now. I'm thinking if I saw that bear, I wouldn't go outside or I would lock the door. But if you were really there, your amygdala would override and we would say we flipped our lid and I might run, I might scream, I might try to be bigger than the bear. I'm going to do fight, flight, freeze, faint, fawn, any of those activities that my brain tells me I need to do to survive that minute, right? Now, situation is resolved, wonderful things happen and we live. Do you know what happens every single time you go outside and see that fence? Every time for the entire rest of your life, you could live another 80 years. And when you went by that fence, you would be like, I saw a bear there once. I saw a bear there once. I saw a bear there once. And you are always going to remember it. And that is a sign of a healthy, functioning brain that you have that amygdala. Is there a bear there? It doesn't mean we can never be relaxed in that area again. It means that we're startled and in that area, it's going to take us additional time to reassure ourselves that we are safe. Now, I want you to imagine you lived where I lived for 18 years in the city of Cleveland. My father's uncles served in the First World War, older parents, right? My father's uncle owned a home off of West Boulevard when it was Old Brooklyn. It was not the city of Cleveland. It was before we moved the airport and did the land swap and traded land with Old Brooklyn and with Brooklyn and with that whole Point Berea school district, Midway, so that would be the city of Cleveland. And he lived in that area when my dad, who was a cousin, was not allowed in that area. Only wealthy Irish were in that area. I have loved this home since I was a little girl. I bought this home. I bought my cousins out when the remaining child of Jim died, and very attached to this home. And do you know where this home is? Do you know where this picture is? This is at Cadell Rec Center. So Cadell, Estabrook, and Michael J. Zone, hopefully this semester we'll be talking with someone who helped participate in the negotiating to finally have those rec centers be a reality, hard fought and won. And if you know Cadell Rec Center, you will know that this is a memorial for Tamir Rice, who was a child who was playing with a toy gun, and police responded to that scene and drove very close. Within their range, they have to pull a gun on someone if it's within 27 feet because of the amount of time it takes to raise and point and aim a gun. And it was right within, and that the responding police officer killed this child. So I want you to think about that bear on the fence. And I want you to think about these bears and what it means in my neighborhood to go play baseball, and what's happening to the amygdala, and what happens in neighborhoods around this city where kids are walking to school or riding the bus to school. And this is right across the street from a major transit station, across the street from the Rapid also. So whether or not those teddy bears are there, which they moved, they took down this pavilion and it's now, there's a memorial somewhere else. What is happening to the amygdalas in that neighborhood if people have to reassure themselves they're safe over and over and over? So the communities that you are engaging in, I would like you to talk about the positionality of what reminders we have of Rat City. What are the things we have that make humans function really well in this community? What do people love about it? Why do people move there? I have family reasons to have moved to my neighborhood. I have nostalgic reasons about brick streets that encouraged me to live in that area. I had religious reasons to live in that area near my place of worship. I had family reasons, right? What are the reasons that people want to leave the community? What are reasons that people want to come into your community? And what are the systemic strengths in your community? Hopefully, I will be interviewing a few pastors from that area as well. All right, so we have some terms. Community building is a more inclusive and respectful phrase than community organizing. Personally, I don't like community organizing only because so many people do it. And so many people do it and say, I'm a community organizer. And here's the real truth. Communities are self-organizing. This Block article that you're going to be reading this week really talk about taking the internal onus, the internal commitment of doing something not for financial reward, but how do I participate as a member of my community to build upon the things that are working for us and build more so that our community can continue to be a place where people thrive, where citizens thrive. And there's a lot on the citizen definition in our block article as well. In any clinical situation, we can look deeper, and there's generally elements of oppression. So when I am a therapist for children aged 0 to 99. I'm a family therapist. I'm trained in trauma adapted family connections, which is a model out of the University of Maryland, out of their social work department. And they work in West Baltimore. Their social work team works in West Baltimore, and it's just such a Cleveland vibe. It's so delightful. And they talk about these family life cycle transitions like a clamshell. So think about admitting and discharging members of a family. That's when the clamshell opens. So you know that thing, here are the church, here's the steeple, open it up, look at the people. That's our community. Those are our families. Found, forged, created families. And how do we get new members? Well, we have to open up and admit a new baby, open up and admit a new school-age child, open up and discharge for a death. We open and close when people are born, when they're married, when they are deployed. And when we have multiple life cycle transitions happening and there's not enough strength and protective factors, that's generally when people are coming to counseling. The things that people are talking to me in therapy about, trauma therapy, around any issue, great or small, we are talking about coping skills and boundaries, and people talk about their moms. I don't care why they come in here. We're talking about moms, we're talking about dads, we're talking about kids, we're talking about family estrangement. People wonder about the election. People, my patients who were very, 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 very stressed about the election, the day after the election could not care less. They were right back to whatever else it was they were stressed about, right? But what are the things that make it harder for some people to receive the supports? And what are the ways that our society is built to prevent some people from having the supports? Or what are the ways that our programs are blind to supports that people don't have? What are we presuming they do have? These are the ways that we confront oppression. Oppression is the systematic subjugation of people, their rights, opportunities, hopes, and beliefs to benefit the interest of others who have power. So I have a great example of a recent kiddo who I saw in therapy, who I treat the family, I treat a lot of the kids. This kid in particular is just not a talker. We just don't mesh personality-wise, like an untold number of therapeutic relationships make or break just based on personality. And this kid is just like, yeah, you're fine, but they don't really like talking to me a lot, right? So a parent wants me to meet with this kid. They say, I just think they got a lot on their mind. They're not opening up. I don't know what is going to happen. And so I meet with this kid and we're chatting. And I said, I kind of have this concept that I have high highs, low lows, and I'm very ebullient, I'm very bubbly, and I experience things very, very deeply. And that's like a personality or positionality, right? And then it seems like that's not what this life is like for you. It seems like you have a pretty constricted view of things. And this kid went, that's so offensive. And I said, help me understand what is offensive about that. And they said, it just is. Just asking about it is offensive. Was that oppression? Do I systematically subjugate this child to defer to the interests of their parents? I kind of have to question, right? And so I said, oh, that's so curious. I don't think I would really want to offend you with that. Can you help me understand how to not be offensive? And they said, you talking is offensive. Well, I guess my only option then is to not talk. So the difference between offensive and depression is that kid was really in a position of no power, right? In a therapy session, parents drop you off. You can't just go home, So for this kid, it really was an intrusive power struggle that I was going to make them talk and make them talk about their internal experience. And of course, I did a little reframe. We moved past it. But it was something I had to I think that the fact that I genuinely had some curiosity and went, let me rethink this and rethink my approach really helped that situation. I hope. So Paolo Freire, Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals, can really talk with you about oppression and our concept of separateness, our us versus them. Well, they're not, those are indications that we are participating in subconscious oppressive thinking. People who are saying you should, or it's good, or it's proper, or it's moral, those people are talking about ends justifying the means. And confronting oppression requires us to confront privilege, starting with our own. So empowerment. Empowerment is a buzzword. Everyone seeks to empower. I see it in a lot of LinkedIn profiles. And when I see the word empowerment, I go, right? What is empowerment? And what is our interest in advanced generalist practice with communities? Well, as we talk about in the Block article, we are empowering our communities to become citizens. We are empowering citizenship. We are empowering commitment. And I cannot come up with a commitment for you, because a commitment is something you cannot retire from. A commitment is something that you wake up and do regardless of how you're feeling. And so it's strongly internally motivated. So my question is, how do I understand the personal interest or investment in the project? Well, that's going to involve a lot of listening, because I live in Cleveland. A lot of people in my family say to me, why do you live in Cleveland? And that is not a rolling out the red carpet question, right? But if you were listening in the beginning, I have told you a number of things that I really love about my neighborhood and my community that I find particularly enchanting. The belief in the possibility of a successful outcome. Can you see how that would empower citizenship and empower accountability, self-accountability to what I said I would do? Development and recognition of individual and group resources. So individual resources and group resources, we're going to talk a lot about formal and informal power structures. And again, I just can't stop referring to this Block 2008, 2009 chapter on how people can reframe and rethink about their individual group resources. Opportunities to take action. When we see protests, we see people eager to take action. So the question is not, what are they shouting? The question is, how do we take this? Really, protesting and sign holding is a show of solidarity. It's a show of demonstrating, you, silent person out there, you are not alone. We are raising our voices up so you can find us. Think about lightning bugs. Lightning bugs in the grass have a certain pattern that they put off, so that females are in the grass and males are blipping at a different rate, right? They're putting out those lights to find one another out in the dark. And birds call. I'm a little boy and I've built this beautiful nest. I'm a girl, come and impress me. They have certain calls and answers, right? That is the role of protest. Protest in and of itself does not accomplish anything. So what's the ask? So if I'm creating an email that I'm sending out, and I really want to have this many people that I'm emailing every quarter, every month on my take action, what is their very specific next step? So great social movements and great community building occurs when people say, and I know what I can do. You know, this is where door knocking campaigns and phone calling campaigns get their steam, is then you see who shows up there. And then maybe those people who do the phone calls are going to put together an annual book club or whatever it is. Recognition of common interests and common risk taking. I really love thinking about this in terms of affinity groups. So affinity groups are a specific format of taking action within organizations that help improve intersectionality. So how do we do this? If my common interest is women's rights, and I want a women's rights group, do you know who's going to show up? Women, right? And women interested in women's rights. What if I have a fishing group? What if I have a disability rights group? What if I have a gardening club? Now, which one of those groups am I most likely to meet someone who speaks more than 2 languages? I don't know, right? But if I had a polyglot group, that's probably most of the people who would show up. So when we participate in common interest items, what we find is that there are people with disabilities who are interested in gardening, and there's women and there's men and there's people of different genders and there's people who speak different languages. So if we want trans rights to matter, we can include language that is supportive of people of different gender expressions at our women's rights group, at our gardening club, which is why that specific issue has found its way into, and it seems very front and center to people. I would argue that the Quakers brought up the use of the pronoun thou a very long time ago to indicate that God had no gender. So I don't think this is as new as we purport it to be. And, you know, male and female, he created them. Them is a plural pronoun, just to let you know. All right, so we can include or we can realize a lot of intersectionality and a lot of commonalities that we have with people when we are not exclusive in our invitations of who participates in our community. Confronting oppression, resistance to working for change. If you've ever seen The Money Pit, they absolutely love this house, and the more and more and more they spend on it, the less happy they are about this house, and the more committed they are to having an amazing result only for their favor, because this is the only outcome we're willing to address. So if we're resisting any other option, and we're really committed to only this method, we can actually impede change. And The Money Pit kind of has a happy ending. It is a love story. I don't want to spoil it for you. It's been out for quite some time. Tom Hanks had all black hair at that point. overcome your own hesitancy. I know many social workers who say, oh, but I'm not really an organizer, or I'm not really a grants person, or I really need to pick the brain of a development person. Just identify simple starting points and decide to act. And that's what we're going to be doing this semester with the communities we're involved in, is reflecting on the actions of social work, reflecting on your actions, your community, your group's actions, and really thinking about inverting our concept of the students create the teacher and the community, the citizens create the community. Cultural competence, which we now say you're never going to reach. Cultural humility is the best that we can ask for, is to understand that my family does things my family's way, and any other person coming over to celebrate Christmas Eve would think it's kind of odd and say, why do you do that? What is that supposed to mean? What is that one for? Don't you have this thing? Do you guys do it that way? Lots and lots of people celebrate Christmas. But the way that my family does it is as unique to my family as the next door neighbor. And that, you know, that's cultural humility, is understanding that we all do things differently, and that there's no way to really predict it. So the capacity, you're striving for the capacity to respond appropriately to various cultural environments that we might participate in. NASW has standards for cultural competence in social work. We will be referring to the NASW Code of Ethics many, many times this semester. Valuing diversity, what a great way, in a maddening way, to understand how binary your thinking is to try to teach what you are learning. Because when we teach it, how I think about it in my own head, how I read it, how I put together these slides doesn't really translate directly to students receiving and understanding the message. So we often end up clarifying our thoughts and refining our thoughts into more coherent, relevant, and closer to the heart of the matter by teaching. Encouraging other people to speak and then listening is a great way to find out what's going on. It can be a little confusing up front to say, I'm here with no agenda. I've been trying to develop relationships in Barnesville for a little over 2 years now, and showing up in a community and just saying, hi, I'm just introducing myself for about 6 months is extremely slow, right? But I ended up building a lot of the relationships that they are not in places where I thought they were going to be. And I am collaborating with people I wouldn't have even thought to ask. I am not a trained person, and I am on a depot committee to rehabilitate a historical train station. And it's got me elbows deep in a lot of really wonderful projects with some movers and shakers. But I would not have done that if I had gone with my initial plan of writing grants for a transportation system. And as a result of working with this existing historical transportation hub, we actually might have some really fun things that are going to include, well, we'll see. Acknowledge that your individual life experiences, think about that mirror, they influence your perceptions, because how could they not? If you don't have a difference of perspective or perceptions from other people, you are not living your life, because life is messy and we meet chaotic characters. And we fall in love with friends that we never knew we would get to meet in our whole lives. And we can acknowledge that these people are often, the diversity of their thought is what is so mysterious, enchanting, surprising, and hilarious to us. This, I don't even know what this is, because we're not meeting live. So I'm just going to delete my entire slide. And how wonderful is that? We now have a 15 slides instead of 16. So there's our lecture for this week. We are going to be moving into our course content, and our journal. So the 9 social work competencies, which are listed on every syllabus you ever had, and I talk about quite a bit in the syllabus review video, which is right up here. You're going to write a sentence for each one of these. So type it out, tippity tap it out. What does it mean to you to demonstrate ethical and professional behaviors within your community? Are you the only social worker on your team? Are you the only person who does not have an LSW on your team? Are you going alone? And how do you know that you are comporting yourself as a professional social worker? The NASW Code of Ethics should help. Then you're going to pick 3 of them that you think are most relevant to your community engagement goals. I say brief explanation of 150 to 200 words because I talk a lot, and I would pick 1 sentence for each, and I want you to stay strict. And if there's one that you're like, oh, I'm doing all of these ADI goals, that's the one you're just going to keep running on about. 150 to 200 words. Think about that paragraph, that 3 to 4 to 5 sentence paragraph that we're writing for our final assignment 4. And remember, this is a journal, so it's informal. You don't need citations. And if it doesn't look at all like what you end up doing at the end of the semester, that is a sign of a win, because that is a sign that your community took you in a direction you didn't see coming, which is like so fantastic. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for joining me on week 1, and I will see you guys all next week.